Welcome back. I'm here with Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report and Sports Business Classroom. Today, we'll be discussing some of the biggest questions in this year's offseason from a salary cap standpoint. And Eric, give us a little elevator pitch about yourself and who you are for anyone who doesn't know.
Let's see. Who am I? Well, I've been writing about the NBA for a couple of decades now, so I've been around a while. Out of Los Angeles, write for Bleacher Report, and really my focus has become the national point of view of where does each team stand financially in terms of strategy? How are they able to build their teams? What direction are they headed? I do my best to do predictive analysis of where a team might go. What happens if Giannis decides to ask for a trade? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, Bleacher will say, okay, what would happen if that were the case? And so I sort of explore those hypotheticals with a certain level of reason and logic. And then as you may know, I've got this thing above me or next to me, behind me, Sports Business Classroom. I'm the general manager of our summer program in Las Vegas, which is really a great opportunity if you're interested in breaking into the business of basketball, be it on the team side, player side, agent side. I mean, I don't mean player side meaning a player, but coaching, development, just working around players, or in media, broadcast, or being an agent, scouting, video analytics, all of that. Of course, salary cap. I partner with Bobby Marks, and we have a great time with about 135-ish students and have a great track record of helping people get on to their next destination, whatever that might be. So if you are interested, just reach out, but you can go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com.
Yeah, and all the information for Eric and Sports Business Classroom will be linked in the description, so you should find it there. And if you need anything specific, Google's a great tool for that. Now, Eric, I think obviously you being an LA guy, if people didn't know, you started as really a Lakers, I guess also Clippers beat writer, you could say in a way, and just worked your way up from there. So you have a lot of, I think the best way of saying, connections and a lot of, in knowings of the inner workings of organizations, at least from the 2000s and on, I would say.
That's fair. I mean, I would say that when I started, just like anyone who starts, you don't really know what's going on. I mean, I think that's kind of fair. In almost any, you look at a basketball rookie, right? They can come in with a ton of talent, but just getting used to what the environment is, what it looks like, what the year looks like. Over time, I've built relationships. I'm just around. You start to meet people, whether, hopefully people like your work or people trust you and know that if they talk to you that you're not going to just put their name on something or just report immediately what they said. And so over time, I have built up relationships and enough of a reputation that I can talk to almost anybody with, almost any team. I don't, I'm not best friends with every GM or, like that, but I have relationships with a lot of people, and I can talk and maybe offer a perspective to them that maybe instead of a demanding give me something or tell me something, I might be able to give them a point of view or a perspective on maybe a rule or how do I think the CBA is landing? How do I think where do I think it's going to be? How, et cetera, et cetera. So I can at least offer maybe something in return, or maybe just not even in return, maybe just give without getting something in return. And I've always tried to be generous that way. And so, yeah, I can say that I have, I've been blessed. I have a good amount of friends in the league. Not everyone I get to tour Miami with like yourself, but a good amount of people that I've gotten to know. So it's kind of cool. I can't complain. I don't get a lot of sleep, but I do have fun.
No, I completely, first off, thank you for all the things you've taught me and just, sort of been a mentor since we've met each other almost, I guess, coming up 3 years now. It's just from not even a CBA, just from a media standpoint. I can say even before meeting you, from reading your articles and then now just being able to discuss, as we've talked in the past, you've broken down big one for me is the understanding of simultaneous and non-simultaneous transactions, which I think a lot of people don't, or even this past time, fully explaining how trades and trade exceptions work, because you think everybody understands like how it works, but you broke down like a more of the granular, I guess it would be the granular. Yeah, you got it. The granular details of it, of how every trade is a trade exception in itself, and then that's how a trade fits into those trades, and then what's left over creates said trade exceptions, right?
Yeah. I would say, generally speaking, the rules are not well understood. And when I say that, I mean by a lot of people who are fans, but also people who are in media, people who are agents. And those agents will tell media people things, and they may not be based on the rules or accuracy. And even with teams, I mean, even general managers, or owners or whatever, I've had conversations where they didn't fully grasp what the concepts were. And I'm not acting like, oh, I know all this, that, the other thing. Like, there's plenty that they know that I don't know. There's the amount that I know versus the amount that I don't know. The amount that I don't know is greater. I think that's safe for all of us, and probably a healthier approach. But I actually, I taught basketball players about their own game. They could teach me more than I would ever know or ever be able to learn about how to play the game actually on the court. But I can teach them a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes and how it all works and how it all fits together.
No, and I think that's a great way of putting it. You always tell me the story of your daughter and how you coached up the scheme against, who was it? Shaq's daughter.
Yeah.
So that's always, I think, a great story of how you always flex your basketball prowess, not just.
I have some basketball knowledge. You can't do this without, but like I can't compare my successful run as a coach in a rec league with 12, 13, 11-year-old girls. I have daughters. I coached all of them, and I can't compare that to somebody who's coached in the league or played in the league and has a deeper understanding of things I could never know, right? Equally, like if they've spent all their time in the gym developing their skills and becoming the best basketball players in the world, which they should spend their time, they may not know how the system works and why the system works the way it does. And if they want to go, a lot of players want to move on to become agents after they're done, or go into front offices and eventually get on that GM track. And so I work on both paths of teaching, like, okay, this is how it works. This is why it works, and try to answer questions, because it isn't easy. Just like learning hoops, like learning a move in hoops, learning a strategy, or a team learning a defensive coverage. It's all theoretical, and then you try to apply it in real time, and then what works, what doesn't, and adjust. It's the same logic of anything else, but I'm just doing it with a spreadsheet instead of a basketball.
Yeah, Rome wasn't built in one day. And with that being said, you talked about how GMs and others look at this. If we were to put on just our GM caps and just take a look, these are the 15 most, according to Hoops Hype, highest salaries that I've shown on the screen. Boston, Phoenix, Cleveland, Denver, and New York round out the expected top 5, which I believe $205 or $204 some change is the triggering of the second apron. Correct me if I'm wrong right there off the top of my head.
Well, let's see. The second apron for this coming season projects to be 207.8.
207.
Yeah, and the first apron 109. Well, we'll call it 196, 195.9. And then the tax is 178, about just under, and the salary cap projects to be about 154.6, so about 155. These are all different steps on the ladder. I like the ladder of spending. So when you go to your list and we say that the second apron is 208, let's just round up, you can see right off the bat you have 3 teams that are over that line. And I have to actually look, because I feel like Cleveland projections are complex, so you have to apply a certain deft hand to it. I'm not sure that your projection includes the jump for Evan Mobley, who was he earned Defensive Player of the Year, and that raised his salary to 46.4. So I have them projected against the second apron, also including some incentives. You have to include Okoro's unlikely, Hunter's unlikely. I have them all the way up at 223.
Wow, right next to Boston?
Yeah, so they're way, and that's before Ty Jerome. So
Ty's gone.
See that, No, not necessarily. Okoro could be gone to, in trade to keep Ty, right? Like,
Yeah.
teams are allowed to make more than one move. I think, when I write a concept, I'll be like, oh, this team gets this player in this fake trade. And someone will say, oh, now they're going to be terrible. It's like, well, they still have like 4 or 5 other moves they can make, right?
Mhm.
Like, you can't just define it. So, singularly. So, if you're Cleveland, the heart of who they are, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, DeAndre Hunter, and then the acquisition of Jarrett Allen. And then if you assume Max Strus is part of that core, and then Dean Wade is relatively cheap. So the next guy on that list in terms of making any actual money is Isaac Okoro at 11. So next is Jalen Tyson at 3-5. So even if they got out of 3-5, right? Let's say they traded Jalen Tyson for nothing. That only barely moves the needle. So it's really just the math says to me, either A, they have to break up their core in some fashion. B, they don't care and will just stay above and don't care that they're this high. That's fine. They could stay the team they are. They can keep or not keep Ty Jerome and just pay more tax. They would only have minimums to add talent, but like the Suns didn't have success, but they did add some quality minimums. The Bucks didn't have success. They added some quality minimums. Gary Trent and Taurean Prince were regular rotation guys. So when you look at the Cavs, A, they have to break up their core. B, it doesn't matter. Or C, they can do a little of both, which is not breaking up their core, but getting out of an Okoro to trim it. Okoro only making 11 probably means they can't get all the way under that second apron, but you take step after step, and teams don't mind theoretically living in it for 1 year above the second apron, because the penalties don't really kick in until it's multiple years. That's when you start to get frozen draft picks down the line. Your first round pick gets frozen. You can dip into above the second apron for a year, but teams don't want to be there for any long period of time. So I'm curious to see what this means for the Cavs long term, but they don't have to decide long term today. They can decide how they're going to approach this year, and it may be any of those pathways. I would guess that Okoro is, I don't think he has tremendous value. I don't think he did a lot. He's a solid.
Gatto said repeatedly that the Hornets were like the one team and the Nets were the ones that had interest in sign trading him. So my assumption.
Right, but that was then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did he do enough this year to warrant for them to say, oh, this is a guy who we thought he was? Because a team's projecting most of the time, especially in a young player, that they're going to be X. And if you can get them at a price below what you think X is worth and then develop them to a price above that, right? They're delivering more than you're paying.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've succeeded, right? That's a very valuable thing in this NBA, to get better talent at a lower price. That's basic economics, right? So, but then when, he stays with the Cavs, has an okay year, was hurt a bit, then he was okay, and then in the playoffs he didn't perform particularly well. Now the whole team didn't perform particularly well, but if we're looking at recency bias, which probably isn't a great way to build your team, but human beings are guilty of, including general managers and front offices. You might look at Gary Trent and see that, man, look what he did in the playoffs. He had 2 30-something point games, hitting a zillion threes that were insane. Maybe we'll look at that he had an okay season, a good season, not a great season, but we'll look at that and be more attracted to him as a player than maybe we should. With Okoro, maybe the Hornets are looking at him and saying, yeah, like in our environment where he really gets a chance to play and have a bigger role, he'll be more than what he was, and that it's situational why he performed poorly, because he's just not a priority on this team, and the shots he's getting are not his shots, right? That might be a point of view. So Charlotte, you said Brooklyn, these teams could absolutely have interest, but also I can't over rely on good intel from Scotto's great at getting intel, but I would want current intel from Scotto
of course
on it versus but it is important to take those data points because they were existing data points, right? Like we know that from Scotto. So I put that in my, if I read that, I'm going to put that in my notes and just say, okay, keep that in mind. And then if it comes up, so the Nets need to get to they need to get to the floor, the minimum team salary this year. Maybe they're paid maybe they take on Jalen Tyson as a young player with talent just to take Okoro. So you're adding a good young player, and then they're helping the Cavs get out of money. And then maybe from a point of view, they're also adding a good still young player in Okoro. So
would then the Cavs, and just to take, not to interrupt you, but to go off, the Cavs, I believe, have Okogie, who is non-guaranteed. I mean, not the Cavs, the Hornets have Okogie, who's non-guaranteed. So if I'm the Cavs, wouldn't you maybe try to get in a deal, let's say, using like a Tyson as a sweetener if you don't want to give up draft capital, to try to get a guy like Okogie for Okoro, so you can just cut Okogie's non-guaranteed salary and create a roster spot?
I think you'd rather just trade Okoro and Tyson to the Nets and get a second round pick back, or maybe $110,000 back, meaning that you just shave an immediate $15-ish million off your books, right? So you just cut that completely. Getting a player back like Okoro to cut him, sure, you could go that route as well. But the question is does Okoro have value to other teams as a player on this contract that they might be more willing to give more to Charlotte than, like, here he's a throw-in. He's another here. The Cavs are getting him to cut him. I guess the question then is Okogie's player value that low for Charlotte that they're basically trading him to a team that's just going to cut him, because they could just cut
Okogie,
him. Yeah. Now I think Okogie is probably at 7.8 expiring. Also non-guaranteed. I would say he's more valuable than that. Also, for the Hornets to make that trade, right? So let's say that, and I'd have to check the math. I'd have to go through it. Like, if you are matching Okogie for Okoro, which
you get my thought process on that, though, is that
there's a bug in that for the Hornets to take back Okoro for Okogie, they have to guarantee as much salary of Okogie's salary to be able to return a player back.
Oh.
To get Okogie for Okoro, if you're sending out 7.75 and non-guaranteed salary, it counts as zero outgoing for the Hornets. Now, that's not prohibitive, because they do have assuming they're over the cap, which is my projection, they would have their non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Let me double check where they are against the cap.
So it bites them
if
they do this trade, basically, because they would have to eat into their exceptions instead of just using cap space or the salary to match that, because it's non-guaranteed, is what you're saying.
Right. Like they could do what you're describing, and I'd have to go through the math to make sure it works. But let's say they can guarantee Okogie and then get Okoro for him, then that defeats the purpose of what you're saying for Cleveland if you're just cutting him. Or they could do that, but then use their non-taxpayer mid-level exception to take in Okoro.
So it doesn't make sense for either party.
Probably. Well, it might, because using your I wouldn't say that that's a no. Most teams, I don't say most, well, yeah, most teams don't use their non-taxpayer mid-level, mostly because they don't have them, or there's apron issues. But what is new in the new CBA is you can use them as trade exceptions. And because you can use them as trade exceptions, it was new. They started to be used this last year. And because they started to get used this last year, it might be, teams might look at it as like, oh, let's not spend our mid-level. Let's save it as a trade exception, specifically our non-taxpayer mid-level or whatever as a trade exception, because it gives us greater flexibility. We'd rather look to make trade this year, especially when you look at the free agent market, which is tepid at best. It's
pretty barren.
Free agent market. So, right. So if you're the Hornets and you're saying the best player that we can get is Okoro, then you can use your mid-level exception to just take an Okoro. But at that point, you might not even trade Okogie. You might just use that and keep Okogie and try to trade him to somewhere else anyway, because he might have value to someone else. So you might be able to, at that point, I don't think the Cavs would even want Okogie. They don't need Okogie. They're trading him in this cycle just to waive him. So, but again, like, if the Nets aren't interested, then that's not an option. And so if Charlotte is the only team, then you have to get into these kind of depths of negotiation of what makes sense for each team. And Cleveland's probably like, yeah, we can't take any salary back. And the Hornets are like, well, we'll do Okogie. And they're like, well, you could send Okogie to a third team, but we can't take him. And that would be under the premise that he's being guaranteed. So then they have to get a third team. Or they could say, we'll do it without Okogie via your mid-level. And the Hornets would say, well, we're saving our mid-level for something else. Or they'll say, absolutely. You know what I mean? So just off of the cuff, Jalen Tyson, I love for these conversations. I would love to see like one of these deals actually happen from that. I have seen a couple of these before where I've had a conversation and then like a week or so later, something very similar happened. Jalen Tyson is at 4. So Charlotte could theoretically just take in Okoro and Jalen Tyson into both of their exceptions because they'll have the biannual as well. You have that every other year. So, but we're talking about them adding about 15 million, and I always do a quick tax check because a team like Charlotte shouldn't and won't be paying the tax. That makes sense. Yes, they're under the tax in this theoretical. They're adding 2 players. Then the next issue is that they are at 17 players, including their second round pick from New Orleans, their own second round pick. They could certainly put one of those 2 on a 2-way, but I think they're pretty high picks. So usually in that high, you're not doing that. And they have their own first. And so then it's like, well, how do you clear a couple roster spaces? Maybe they could get out of, they would probably keep Diabate. I thought he played well enough for them. But at that point, they're probably either cutting or trading Okogie somewhere else and maybe getting out of Jeffries and then seeing if there are any other bigger moves. So it's within the realm of reason. But these are the kind of like nuances and details I go through to sort of make sure that a fake trade, which Bleacher loves from Rate, that it makes sense. And I put the thought into not just like we're talking about how to save the Cavs money, and now we're talking is Diabate or DeQuan,
who both had great years on minimum deals,
right? So like Jeffries and he's 2 years, by the way. He's got
and his non-guaranteed, right?
All not right, very flexible deals. So either they like him or they don't. He played well enough for them on a terrible team. So we'd have to, but they could look to get out of Grant Williams. They could look at get out of Josh Green,
John Saloon, who's terrible,
or even Melo or Bridges or Grant Williams, etc. Like they could completely go in different directions as well. So I generally don't make the premise of like, oh, this team completely changes direction in their star players or core players without some level of intel. I can speculate a little bit on LaMelo because there have been some conversations I've heard through the years, and I don't know how current they are, that there's not a complete merit.
There was a report this week that everyone except Brandon Miller was considered untouchable on the Hornets roster, or only Brandon Miller is untouchable on the Hornets roster. Everybody else is open to trade discussions. I forget who reported that, but it was on Hoops Hype's front page.
Sure. I don't know specifically where they are right now on LaMelo. I had made a very early, before they got Cooper Flagg's, presumably Cooper Flagg in Dallas, a theoretical of okay, trade Kyrie and other considerations to get Melo. And I think I had them including the first round pick in this draft, which now is number 1. So that that logic is probably flown.
Yeah.
You could look and see what makes sense. But I did play with the idea of Melo moving because, it's a bad team. He's the best player and the star, and doesn't look like.
If you had,
so we'll see
if you had to think at this point, who would even be interested in acquiring LaMelo, because we've talked about this before in a league where he's a ball dominant player who it's going to have to be a team that A, needs a guard desperately, and B, has a star who's going to be able to play off of a ball dominant guy like LaMelo. So I just feel like it becomes harder he's one of the harder guys to gauge where he could get. I don't know why in my mind the Pelicans, if they're trying to dump off of Murray or McCollum's contract, comes to mind, and then you pair that with Zion. If Joe Dumars. Is that wrong for me to think, or what do you think? And what have you thought out?
Well, the first conversation was Dallas, but that included the pick when it wasn't that high. They still have, let's see, they wouldn't trade their 25. Let me make sure I'm in the right spot here.
And you're talking Dallas right now?
They looking at Dallas, they have the Laker pick.
Would this be for then PJ? But PJ and Daniel would be the guys who would build that deal around, right? If you're Dallas.
Well, I mean, it could even be Kyrie, and it's just they're just taking. I've heard that Kyrie probably opts out, and they keep him at like 35 million.
Yeah.
But like, let's say that they're like, okay, Kyrie's not going to be healthy, and we're replacing him with Melo, right? You don't need Kyrie and Melo, right? So like, you're saying Kyrie won't be healthy until February, March. We're not going to keep him
or 18 months.
We think I'm just saying theoretically. Let's say if they feel like Melo's shortcomings on defense can be offset by and all the other role players that they have, right? Like, let's just say theoretically that's their point of view. I'm not saying it is. The problem is that you're not going to trade Cooper Flag. So then, as I look through the picks, Dallas I think they already owe to Charlotte, and it's already top 2 protected. Like, they have the Lakers in 29. They have 2031. So you could do a couple of, you can't trade 2032 yet. Let me make sure I get this right. We're talking about 26. So 26, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 5. Yeah, so you could trade up to 2032. I just didn't update my Dallas yet. But you can go to 2032, but they can only trade, so they could trade 2 firsts, and then they have some swaps. So you could do like a swap into, so let's say you do 2 firsts for Melo. It's not like Melo is, Luka or anything. But let's say you're doing 2 firsts for Melo plus Kyrie. And then that in and of itself is enough to get the deal done. But, maybe there's some other pieces involved. But let's, like Prosper or, a young player like that, whatever. Let's just go with the theoretical, maybe Caleb Martin or something, whatever. You could get a couple of firsts. Is that enough? Probably not. They probably want good young players back too. But you said
if Melo's, New Orleans was what I was just trying to think. The other team, New Orleans, Orlando, or Houston, are the other guard needy teams.
So what New Orleans has in terms of picks, in addition to their own first this year, they have Indiana's next year, which 20. If you were to project, Indiana will be at least around the 20 range next year, maybe 25. I don't know how good they'll be regular season or not, but if we assume that they're as good as they are now next year, that pick isn't very high. And then New Orleans has some other picks. Again, this is a team that was among the worst in the league this year. So do you want to be aggressive giving out picks? The other thing is they have DeJounte Murray, who's recovering from Achilles, may not be healthy for a long period of time. You're assuming, in theory, that when DeJounte comes back, that he and Melo can successfully play together. Let's say they make that assumption. You have CJ McCollum's 30.7 million. I don't think they're going to touch Trey Murphy and Herb Jones. And if we assume that they're keeping Zion, then you've got players to move like Hawkins, technically Alvarado. They're not going to trade Misi. Olynyk. There's plenty of numbers to get up to.
Couldn't they sign trade Bruce too in there?
Sure. But it would have to be a 3-year deal. And is that a deal that Bruce Brown is going to be willing to take? And do they need to do that? Like, you would do a sign and trade last. You do it when you need to do it. But you need to get, I don't know who else is offering what to Bruce Brown. If he can get 10, 8, 6, 7, 14 somewhere else, which he may or may not, does he think he can get a better deal? Like, let's say they're saying, okay, we'll do $8 million for 3 years. He might not do that. But if they're saying we'll do 14 million or so for 3 years, he'll probably do that. So it's at least a possibility. I think really what you have to look at more seriously, though, which is why I didn't do Bruce, is because the Pelicans never pay the tax. They just don't. The last 2 years they've started above the tax and traded out of it. This year, it's just not gonna. They're not gonna go in the tax. So if you're adding in LaMelo, making in the neighborhood of what is he making? 38 million this year,
Yeah.
and they're about 5 million, 5.1 million under the tax. So you're definitely wanting to prune out some salary as well. So if you're taking CJ out, that's 31, and then you're combining with Olynyk, so that's 40 something. So you're wanting to do that if you're New Orleans to get out of that. Maybe you want to keep Olynyk and you do Alvarado and Hawkins, because at that point, yeah, I don't know. You could argue you keep Alvarado to back up because you don't have DeJounte healthy, so you're probably needing Alvarado at this point. Although they also have Alfred Payton, so there's this certain amount of flexibility that they can, if this was the motivation. I don't know what the asking price would be on Melo, but the Pelicans do have some draft capital, not as much as they had previously because they went after and got DeJounte, but they have the Indiana pick, and they have all of their own picks. There's some swaps, but they can certainly get there. And then a young guy, Jordan Hawkins, maybe that's interesting to Charlotte to see if he's a player.
Especially if they draft VJ, makes sense.
Yeah, and if they have to include Bruce Brown, if that makes sense to do sign and trade, it's at least a potential option. The challenge, again, is anything I do with New Orleans results in them being under the tax.
Now, going off of that, I know LaMelo is an LA guy, and more it seems like players are pushing to teams or to cities that they would like to go. Do you think that's obviously not Lakers, but maybe Clippers with Norman Powell? You think they would get in there, or does that just become too many cooks in the kitchen? You think with Harden and Kawhi that they're just going to stay course with what they're doing there?
So there's a couple things. Number one, like LaMelo having 4 years left has minimal to no say on where he goes.
Mm-hmm.
When a player's in the last year, they have the most power because, if you're a strong enough player and you're going to unrestricted free agency and you're going to get max offers, you just tell the team, like, there's no way we're re-signing. So if you want to trade for us as a rental for a year, we'll show up. We don't want to be there, and we're going to leave in a year. That's up to you. And that'll usually scare off the team. They don't want to bring in a star who doesn't want to be there. That rarely works well. Then, with James Harden and some other guys, even Damian Lillard, they've started to push harder when they've had 2 or even 3 years left. But like James was able to successfully get to where he wanted to go, but Dame wasn't, because Dame's was, I think, 3 years at the time. So now you look at Melo, a young player who hasn't really achieved much other than, some all-star appearances, which is great. And I'm not slighting his career. I'm just saying it's not like you're talking about trading Giannis or Jokic or something crazy, right? We're talking about a guy who is yet to prove that his brand of basketball can lead a team to successful playoff performance. So with 4 years left, I don't think LaMelo has any say. As far as the Clippers, that's a very good question. As far as what I think they'll do is try to get Harden to time with Kawhi to end in 26, 27. And the only obvious guy that is an issue is Powell is extension eligible, and he's going to want money now. And if they're not going to give it to him, he's not going to want 1 year. Then maybe he's the sacrifice they have to make to improve. So Powell could be the guy that they trade with Bogdanovic timing perfectly, where he's got a team option next year.
And it's not guaranteed, right? Like fully.
Well, team option, it is guaranteed, but it's a team option. So it's only guaranteed. The salary is guaranteed, but only if they opt into it, right? So the year doesn't exist. If the year exists by option, then it's a guaranteed year. So there are cases where you have an option that's also not guaranteed. So Duncan Robinson has an ETO, and if he doesn't take his option and doesn't opt out early,
or Fred VanVleet as a non-guaranteed.
Well, that's closer to this. So those are fully guaranteed if they're opted in.
Whereas, I thought his was only 10 million guaranteed only.
Who's that?
Fred VanVleet's.
I'd have to check that. I don't believe that to be true, but I'd have to check that.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I thought his was player team option, but only partially guaranteed team option.
I can answer that if my while you're asking me other questions, I'll look it up.
Yeah. So you were saying, so basically the Clippers in turn, as we knew, their trade chip is Norman Powell and or Bogdanovic with his option.
Yeah, and well, with the Clippers, like the question is, does after a good year, does Kawhi try to get another year too? So, like, they kind of have to decide: have they reached the pinnacle? This was their absolute best season they've had in a long time, and everyone was healthy, and they still fell short, admittedly, by a crazy last second play that basically blew their whole postseason up with Aaron Gordon on the last second dunk, which was, absolutely. I don't think LaMelo makes sense for who they are. No, Van Vliet's his third year is fully guaranteed if they opt
fully. Okay.
So it's yeah. Duncan Robinson is a better example where he's 19-9 almost for the Heat, and he has an option which he can opt out of that early termination option, but when he doesn't, which I assume he won't, then it's only 9.9 guaranteed. So then it's,
and that's rare.
Time for it is rare for substantial contracts. It's not that rare for like minimum contracts. Like short, small deals. It's not, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not uncommon for like a small, short deal to have a combination of option, non-guarantee, or partial guarantee. So like Scottie Pippen, for instance, on Memphis. He's got...
Or Shake.
Shake. Does Shake have an option year? I don't know if Shake has... I think his is all just non-guaranteed.
All just non-guaranteed,
yeah. But in Scottie Pippen Jr., so the way it works is that in an option, the terms have to be basically the same as the prior year, except in a rookie scale. Not a rookie scale, except in a second round pick exception. That's kind of its own thing. So not for second round pick exception, which are the special way you can sign a second round pick. Scottie Pippen, when undrafted, was signed via the non-taxpayer mid-level by Memphis to a 4-year deal, 3-year deal. Let me see. He signed a 4-year deal. Okay. So his last year is a team option. The second to last year is only $350,000 guaranteed. So the way it works is that the terms basically have to be the same in the option. So because the year before isn't guaranteed, when he's opted in, assuming he is, it has to be the same terms of non-guaranteed, and it scales up. So instead of it being $350 guaranteed, it'll be $396 because it's proportional based on his salary. And then the timing is it's basically equal timing, July 3rd, and then July 3rd of each year. So like there's some minute details in how contracts are written where that becomes a default. So it is relatively common in those scenarios, but in like a big contract, it is less common. Like the Duncan Robinson ETOs he's the only one left actually with an early termination option. Anthony Davis, Davis Bertans, and Duncan Robinson were the only 3, and now Duncan is the only one. I hope someone else gets one, just because when I teach, I need to have an example of a player with one, and I'll use Duncan for as long as I can, but it'd be better to have like, here's an active player so I can teach how an early termination option works. And it just gets more and more abstract when no one has it and it doesn't exist in the NBA. So
I only knew about them through football because they were more common in NFL contracts
It used to be more common in the NBA, but that was because you used to have the ability to do 7 or 6 year contracts. And the idea is that the last year you would have like a player option. This is like a star player. In the last year, player option. The second to last year would be ETO. You can't do that anymore. That's 100% illegal now. But
Tim Conley had one though. Like from an executive standpoint, you remember last year he pushed his ETO option from last year to this year, and then with the whole Mark, because he said he was moving the option because the whole Mark Lore arbitration was ongoing. So he said I guess because he had team equity in his contract, he said he was going to push it to next year, and then now he's expected to sign a new contract. But is that more common, I guess, in like for coaches, because also coaches have that. We heard already the option, like we'll hear either coaches will pick up their option or a team will pick up their early option, like for Darko Rajakovic. So I know you said it's not common in players anymore, but is this something, I don't know if you have any knowledge about, like, from an exact coach?
It's just such vastly different rules.
Oh,
Like the rules are so vast because like coaches' contracts aren't tied to basketball related income. They're not like
does that
it's
why? That
well,
you would think they would,
it's
right?
it's a complete well no, I mean it's a completely different like you have 30 coaches, right? And not including assistants, right? Like we have 500 something players. It's a whole how does the money that comes in for the NBA get split up? You're allowed to pay a coach a little bit, you're allowed to pay a coach a lot. Smaller markets might pay a little or they might pay a lot if they get a chance to get a big name. Some big markets will spend a ton, some big markets will be cheap. Depends on so many
Oh,
different factors.
so with the
So
Grizzlies, that's why it was a big name when they brought in 7-figure assistants to last offseason for Taylor Jenkins in comparison if it's a different market.
right. I
Like,
mean it's totally different universe because of, the fans aren't paying to see Taylor Jenkins or David Adelman or Doc Rivers or JJ Redick. Like they're paying to see the players. And so they're in it like there's like referees association. Like the referees have their own union and their own collective bargaining. That coaches have their own union and their own collective bargaining, but they're independent bodies separate from the MBPA, which represents the players, and they're just based on a different set of economics, right? Like they're
oh,
not necessarily tied to the growth of the league. They're like if the NBA is healthy, they're going to spend more on refs because they can because the league is healthy. But it's just a different animal. Like where all this money's coming in because of LeBron and Steph and the star players, and we need a system that properly compensates the players relative to the teams and deciding how much should the stars get, how much should the teams get, how much should the players who aren't stars get, how do teams have budgets, and it all fits together. So we just have a more complex system that has to stay healthy in a different way than a much smaller system for 30 coaches at a time, not including assistants.
sounds like almost like college in a way, how like the ADs and the coaches, especially from a public university, are like you can go on your taxpayer website on like California or Kansas or Florida and see the highest paid government employees are the athletic directors and the coaches at your state universities. And that's like because they're paid by the, but if you go then to a state like Wyoming, obviously the Wyoming head football coach is paid by taxpayer dollars in Wyoming, but he doesn't make as much as Cal football's coach, or
Sure.
so I guess in that way, yeah, those budgets are different because the players aren't being paid by the taxpayers, but I'm just using this as an example. If you replace taxpayer money with, like, I guess this would be the owner's actual money, and then in turn the players are being paid with the league revenues money, is how you're putting it.
They're not paid by league revenue money, but they are paid in relation to league revenue. Like the teams pay them,
Mhm.
and the teams are required to spend a certain amount relative to the money that came in. So if you have BRI, basketball related income, and we'll use simple numbers, if it's 10 billion,
Yeah.
then the players need to get 5 billion. And it's technically 51%. It's 49 to 51. We're going to just make it super simple. 10 billion, 5 billion goes to the players. If the players got 5.2, then they're not going to get that 2. They're going to the teams are going to keep that, or the league is going to keep that. Right?
Can you
Or
explain?
yeah.
And I want you to add to your thing. You explained to me that last year we overspent, and this year players aren't making as much. So can you finish what you're explaining and add to the people for people to understand why? I
Right.
guess
Well, I
the
mean, I don't know if we overspent, the two of us. I know that like is expensive with 3 kids, so maybe so. I will say that like the the way that the system works is that players only get 10% of their money throughout the year. So if you're a $10 million player, throughout the year you're getting paid $9 million. And the reason for that is we we as a collective, the league, needs to hold back some money in case players were overcompensated. This last year, they were overcompensated. We're talking about the one that's ending right now, 24-25. They are getting back about 9%, or rather, they're not getting back 9%. They're getting back about 1%. So players are, if we withheld 10%, and we're the league, we're paying out one of those percent back. We're keeping 9%. So $10 million player, $1 million in question, the league would keep 900,000. The player would get 100,000 back. That's for this last year. Those are rounded numbers. And the reason for it in part is because of the regional networks dying and also overspending. So it's a combination where teams were spending too much, Phoenix, Boston, et cetera, and timing that with the league not making enough money means that the players got too much. So now that they got too much, a $10 million player only got 9.1, a $30 million player, 27 point, whatever, 3, whatever. So if it goes the other way, where if the teams didn't spend enough, let's say that they were supposed to spend $5 billion, and now they need to spend another $200 million. They'll cut a check or electronic payment, but they'll pay the MBPA, and the MBPA will distribute that money to the players. Now that won't go to max players because they already got the max, so that wouldn't help a staff or whatever. But everyone would get more, and they would get all of their 10% back because you're withheld 10. We didn't pay enough. We're the league. 10% back, so everyone gets their $10 million player gets their $1 million back, plus they get their share of whatever that would be of $200 million short that was distributed among all the players. And it's up to the MBPA how they distribute it. It's not in the CBA. I believe it's based on games on rosters. It might be like 20 and then 40. So like if you were under 20, you got a certain amount. If you're 20 to 40, you got another. And if you're on a roster, not a roster, but collectively, because some players end up on I signed a bunch of different contracts, but I made it to 41 games.
Moses Brown.
Right, something like that. You'll get a different level of kickback. And again, that's really, that's my estimation of what the MBPA does. I don't know the exact payment plan, but, and then it won't go to the max players. So that hasn't happened the last couple of years. Actually, since the pandemic, that hasn't been an issue with it did happen at some point. It happened in recent history. I have it on record
before COVID, like when we had Earl Clark and Joe Johnson coming back out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean there were times around 2016 where teams just couldn't spend enough, right? When the TV deal kicked in and it was too high. So right now we're going to the teams are. We're shifting now because we have a new broadcast deal in. So now we're shifting to the teams are still going to probably be paying too much. Well, no, not enough now, right? Because there's going to be a limit on what they can spend. So we're pushing the cap up as high as it'll go. There's a limit of 10% climb. And so in theory, we start to shift where the players aren't getting enough. Equally, the new rules are curbing the overspending. So, as we get a better grip at, the league and the teams and whatnot, get a better grip on spending, then we should be getting closer and closer. I'm told that it'll take about 2 years for the new system to even out. Like the new money that kicks in, the cap's going to climb 10%. And then after a couple of years, it'll start to even out where the new money coming in starts to match the cap and players will get more naturally to the normal system. In other words,
so it's staggered.
Players are getting underpaid this next year, and the players should theoretically get a balloon payment, like we just discussed,
like in 2016.
Yeah, for the 25-26 season, when we get to June 30th, which is New Year's Eve, the league releases its final accounting. The MBPA has audited it. They've argued. They've agreed to whatever the final accounting is. Mm-hmm. Now we know how much money they're going to get back and how that works. And we don't really know the answer yet, but we can project. It might be that way for one more year, and then it'll start to be more organic.
Is this because they are trying to avoid Timothy Mozgov, Bismack Biyombo
well,
style contracts?
well, kind of like for one, it's a massive influx of money because the TV deal is rising. So what they tried to do, the league in 2016, was do what's called cap smoothing, which is artificially lower the cap. And at the time, Michelle Roberts had recently joined as the director of the NBPA. Now, I'm very, I think she did a very good job in that role. I thought she managed a healthy league and helped us get through the pandemic. So this is not a slight on her tenure. I would say that at the time when she was new to this position, a trust hadn't been built up. And so when the league wanted to do something that PA didn't agree, they had economists come in and tell them, no, it's not good. I asked them, were those NBA specific economists who understand the league in a deeper? No, they were just general economists who didn't understand. They made a bad recommendation and they didn't do cap smoothing. And because of that, teams had to spend money. Now, did they have to spend it the way that they did? No. They could have done shorter deals, etc. But that's how we got the Mozgovs and Noahs. And 2016 was a watershed year for role players getting way too much money relative to their production that led to guys getting bought out and waivers and stretch. It was.
I mean, Sean Marsh also was a vigilante out there offering Alan Crabb and whoever else an offer sheet.
And so ultimately, that was a mistake at the time. And again, I don't judge Michelle Roberts' entire career off of this one mistake. I find
that 2020.
Yeah, well, no, hindsight at that time, it was very clear. I was saying this, that you reject. I was saying there's no good reason. There's no logical reason for you to reject. Everybody and every player will get compensated if you do this. If you don't do this, only the free agents will be compensated this year. And the players who aren't free agents won't be properly compensated. So you'll have an imbalance where some players are getting paid too much, others are getting paid too little relative to their production and value to the teams that they play for. So you might have a player who's all-star level getting under what a Mozgov might, and that didn't make sense. So if you weren't a free agent that year, you were screwed relative to those who were. So it didn't make sense at the time. I made it clear at the time it didn't make sense, but I'm not in a position of power to make. If I have any power now, it has increased. It's still under 1% or 2% of influence, if that, right? Like I can at least reach out to some of these folks and give my opinion, but would they listen to it or take it into consideration? I don't know. Should they? That's obviously relatively. I would like to think so, but regardless. If you look at the balance of what Michelle Roberts did, I think that she was very successful in her role as director of the NBPA, and they had a very healthy, prosperous run under Chris Paul and her in getting the league healthy and growing the league, and then dealing with the pandemic, etc. But all that said, now the NBPA, when they work the new deal, we're like, yeah, we'll work in cap smoothing into the system because it makes a ton of sense now that we better understand it. So if anything, that is justification for my argument that it was right all along. So we have cap smoothing to make sure that it doesn't jump up. What that means is that everybody gets money. So let's say that they're 400 million short the league in payments because of the new, that's a made up number. I don't know the number, but let's say it's 400 million. Then every player divided by a certain amount gets a piece of that, except for the max players. And then the only other detail in there that matters to agents, because they're a part of this equation, they don't get commissions on that overage, that extra money. So, and then also if you're getting 91%, a player's getting 91%, the agent's only getting 91% of their commission because you're only getting commission on what the player is paid, not their actual contract. But also conversely, you are only getting paid on their actual contract if they're getting a bonus kickback because the BRI split didn't add up. And so agents lose if the system isn't healthy. So an agent should want there to be the proper breaks on teams overspending so that there's a general sense of health across the board and that they're getting as close to 100% of commission that they're supposed to get, and that their players aren't getting paid more money that the agents aren't earning off of. And like, obviously we could, the league, even the NBPA, they may not agree. They may say that the agents are entitled to what they're entitled to. But working with a lot of agents, they work very hard. Some of them do, some don't. But the ones that I certainly collaborate with or communicate with or consult with work hard at trying to take care of their players. They should be compensated for what they're supposed to be compensated for. So there's some imbalances in the system, inequities, things that are not perfect, that I've sort of touched on. But that's where we're headed. We're headed into a period of growth that is too fast for the league, for the system to account for. We have a cap of 10%. The players will get extra money, offset by whatever overspending teams might do, which the net will wash out and the players will get extra money. And I'm told it'll only be a couple of years worth of that before it sort of evens out with a new TV deal. So it's not, I asked somebody, it was like, in fact, they might not even do escrow this year. Like they may even look at the numbers and say, because they have the power within the CBA, the NBA, NBPA to negotiate. They could negotiate out just for this year escrow completely. So the players get 100% of their money throughout, because they can do a very basic economic projection to say that the players are going to be shorted. And if they're definitely going to be shorted, and if we know they're going to be shorted, then there's no reason to do escrow. Now, obviously, there could be pandemic. There could be another occasion.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they'll do that. They may want that anyway as some sort of
cushion
apocalypse types protection, because the players will always get their money back. But I know the NBPA will certainly negotiate to get it removed for this year, because why wouldn't they? Of course they would. Like, why would they not want? They would want their players to get 100% of their money if they're going to get a kickback of the overage, or rather the underspend of the league. If they're going to get a kickback of that, why should they also have escrow when they're going to get it back anyway? And the league may say no, just in case there's another pandemic or something crazy. Then we'll.
Quick question off of all this, with the sale of the Boston Celtics and now the expansion, does this have anything to tie into all the CBA and like cap minutia that needs to be figured out? As I remember what they said, the pandemic and the bubble altogether cost the NBA almost $7 to $8 billion, something like that.
Well, I mean, we've already they worked into, like, they basically, the league stopped, they froze. They could have, the NBA or the NBPA, ripped up the collective bargaining agreement based on the circumstance. Like, it was within the power based on force majeure, like, which is, like, things go bad, which they did. Like, worst case scenarios. We hit a worst case scenario. They could have ripped up the CBA. Instead, they came to the table, negotiated a way through and how to offset the money. And so we have a system to account for that. And we're healing from it, and we're still dealing with it. And that, may even contribute to why the cap wasn't quite as high this year as was projected, the bounce back from.
So there's still ramifications being felt, is what you're saying.
But to an extent, but I think we're pretty much past that. The new ownership, like, teams sell, they buy and sell. What the valuations are don't really impact the day to day. It's kind of, I don't know if you know accounting, but like there's the balance sheet and an income statement.
Yeah.
An income statement is like how much you're making in a year,
of course,
and how much you're spending and what's your profit. That is more of like how we base the NBA system on. Whereas the balance sheet is like, how much are things worth? Like, how much a team is worth? What is the asset value? What's the equity? That none of that really matters in the NBA equation of like BRI and cap and things like that.
Do the players benefit, or is that basketball related income when a team is sold, or no?
No, that's not basketball related income. So that is a big bone of contention in 2011, which is when we had teams really losing money. And the NBPA argued.
What do you mean really losing money?
Oh, I mean like 22, 25 teams were losing money year after year leading up to 2011. How? Because in part because of the Lakers TV deal, which was with Time Warner Cable, which became Spectrum, was paying them like 20-25 million a year, and everybody else was making, not everybody, everyone else was making about $1 million a year. And so because the Lakers were making all this more, like, well, who cares? Like, Lakers make more money. Well, that goes into BRI, that basketball related income. And at the time, we didn't have revenue sharing at the same level that we do now. So the Lakers didn't have to share it as much. and teams have to spend 90% of the cap. The cap went up because of the Lakers, because of other factors. The cap was going up, and the minimum spend was going up, but the income wasn't going up for the Grizzlies, for the Nets, and so you start going through, and you have small markets. The players were also getting 57% of the BRI split. The teams were only getting 43%. So the general income for each team was much lower. As the league grew, they're only making 43 cents on the dollar as it grew. And so we had a system where teams were just not making money. The league was just not profitable in that way. Now, it might have been profitable on the whole, but individually, the teams were struggling. The argument from the NBPA was like, sure, you're losing money year after year, if we agree to that, which really they had to, because like you can't have a negotiation and teams draw up fake books and make up a second set of books to show they're at a loss, because at some point, if there's fraud, it puts the entire league in danger. They end up in front of Congress. You can't do fraud on a massive level.
Are you referring to the Commanders?
I'm not even referring to anything, but like if at some point stuff is going to come out and it puts the entire league at risk. And then if you have X amount of teams, 20 teams losing money, you're not going to be able to get 20 teams to collude in fraud when 20 teams can't collude in anything. They disagree on every damn thing. Like, teams are rivals. They don't agree to stuff. It's hard to make trades. They don't agree on most of anything, right? It's like your own little kingdoms. It's like, go back to like Europe and England, when you have all these different little countries like Europe, and feudalism and fights and like different castles and everybody hating each other and going to war, even though you're neighbors, basically. It's like, that's what the NBA is in a sense. And so, so like, let's take the NBA at its word and the teams at their word. And I literally saw a couple of the statements at the time by the teams, the accounting statements that were submitted, that showed their operating incomes is like $100-200 million loss. And so the argument from the NBPA was, yes, but your owners are able to buy your team. Like if you're Sterling, you buy it for like 300 million or something like that, whatever you bought it for, and then selling it for like billions. And the players are always trying to find a way to get a piece of that, and that'll always be a negotiation. And there's some like, the players can be a part of an investment fund that generally invests in teams, but they can't be, so they're trying to find ways to get to that. But ultimately, the growth and the sale and the profit of team ownership is for the owners. It's not the players, and they don't benefit from that. And it's very complicated when you say, like, how would somebody who's in the league for 3 years, 4 years, how should they benefit from a team escalating in value over 20 years? Like, how should they benefit from that? So, you run into all these issues. Certainly the PA will always argue and try to get that, but right now they don't really have that. And I don't think that they will at any point in the near future. What they do get is, what they did give up is they did go from 57 to 50-50. It's 49 to 51, but the players, to solve this economic issue, did give up a big chunk. And then the NBA teams the NBA itself and the teams came up with a healthier revenue sharing plan. So they hit it at both angles. Lakers share more, Warriors share more with the smaller teams. Then we have better income because now it's 50-50. So for every dollar, you're making 50 cents instead of 43, within that range, and then within the band. And then because we have health, now we have like, teams have better practice facilities. They have better travel. They have better food. They have like so many assistant coaches and player liaisons and like all of catering there's so many benefits that a player can just be a player. There's better security now. So there's like fewer groupies hanging around at games trying to get at players. They can still hit them somewhere on Instagram and DMs, but like in person, there used to be an element at games when I was first started that was, predatory women on trying to on young men who, look, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but
you're telling me I like the tunnels. Like you could go at the end of the Lakers game where they would run out, and like you told me they were just like completely different how it is now.
And it's, the players are in a much better, healthier space in terms of all aspects. I mean, when I first started, like the Clippers were working out of like the sports club or some, like they didn't even have a practice facility.
Can I bring that up though? So I was going to say this. I'm going to use the Bulls as one example and Portland as the other example. Is I know the whole revenue system or revenue sharing system, people will argue, have made some owners disincentivized to do more than the minimum, because in terms of, someone could argue the Bulls, since Jordan has left, they haven't really put money back because they know if they just go from the middle, they're always going to be making money because of how the revenue sharing works. And then Portland, I went to the Moda Center and I really liked going to that game, but they haven't, everywhere it still says the Rose Garden, and like you clearly can tell like there has been no money put back into that arena. And like it seems like
the arena.
Yeah, they originally did, and then they gave it to $1 to the city, I believe, and the city now owns it for $1. So,
and the city hasn't updated it.
Well, I think that happened after Paul Allen died. So basically, his sister said, "Oh, I don't want to be responsible for this anymore, so I'm going to move responsibility to the city."
Right. But then at that point, it's the city's responsibility to update.
Of course. But we know the billionaire did that so they didn't have to get in trouble with the from the city with all the codes and everything.
Right. I mean, Portland is a very unique.
But you get what I'm saying, though. Like, they create that smaller owners know that they're always going to have money coming in, so why spend more?
So the teams always get a massive share of the national TV revenue. So if you have 30 teams, you're getting, I don't know, a league might take a cut, but forgetting about the league for a second, you're getting like a 30th share of the national TV deal. It's not a 30th because the league is getting some, but like, let's say it's a 30th. So that in and of itself existed anyway, right? And then revenue sharing, like, you're not like, I don't know how much revenue sharing Chicago is getting. Like, that's a big market. So I don't know if they're a receiver on the revenue sharing model.
I thought it's just that if you're negative is always covered. No team is ever in the red.
Well, I mean, to an extent, like just your share of the national TV deal should get you there. But no, like it's based on your gross, and it's like how much money you make. Everyone puts the same amount of money in the revenue sharing. It's all on paper, so you're not actually putting in the money.
Yeah.
So like you're putting in paper money into the system, and then you're getting back relative to your income. So if the Lakers are top 5 in income, they get 0 back. And if the Grizzlies are bottom 5, theoretically, they're getting the biggest share. And if the Bulls are 10, then maybe they're getting nothing or a tiny bit back relative to their gross. So it's not, I don't think, like,
they can't rig it.
Well, I mean, like the Bulls not doing what they're doing well is a reflection of the Bulls and their ownership. And like, you can't, like, if someone owns a team and they're in the league has very little that they can do to get rid of that person, unless the person does what Robert Sarver or Donald Sterling did, gross behavior that goes beyond that. Like Reinsdorf, you can say it's gross that he hasn't built a good team, but that's within the bounds of legality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. I don't love the way they built their team, but from their point of view, they'll say they've done a lot. They paid Zach LaVine, they paid Vooch, they made these trades to get Vooch, they did these things that they thought would work. They went out and got DeRozan. Like, obviously players who have since moved on, DeRozan's gone, etc. Zach is gone, but that's not the point. And they went out and got Giddey for Caruso, which for them has been a successful move. They had a great run late. They're middle of the pack. But from their point of view, like, I mean, they didn't draft that well. Like, they didn't make great decisions. They've always
Patrick Williams.
Right. Like, they've been good enough to just miss the playoffs or just make the playoffs, but not do anything. And if Reinsdorf is the reason because he isn't a good owner, I'm not saying he is or isn't, but if that's the case, there's little that the league can do about it. Like, you can't make an owner, and not talking about Reinsdorf, you can't make an owner be smart or diligent or hire good people or make good decisions or spend money. You look at, like, half the league doesn't even spend into the luxury tax in any sort of level of consistency or even at all. So all of this outcry of, like the aprons and the league is shutting down, like all these second aprons. Like, if half the league doesn't care about the tax, they're not going to pay the tax. Why do they care about aprons if they're not even going to pay the tax?
Yeah, and I think the Pacers are showing now that what you can do without paying the tax, and like when push comes to shove.
Thunder aren't paying the tax.
Now, as of right now, and same thing with the Pacers, like if they're going to want to keep their cores together, they're going to have to decide, obviously.
Right, like right now, Minnesota's a taxpayer, New York is a taxpayer, but to be honest, neither of these teams over the last, I don't know, call it 10 years,
has 15
taxpayer. Yeah. They haven't been heavy taxpayers. The Knicks did not pay. I'll pull it up. In terms of tax.
Yeah, because wasn't that the whole Jeremy Lin thing?
Tax cal.
It was a tax reason.
If we look at Minnesota, they paid $500,000 in tax in 2019-20, which is also a year where the tax kickback was at a minimum. So it was basically the easiest year to pay the tax. They didn't pay the tax any other year until 24-25. So they're finally paying the tax, but they've always avoided it. The Knicks have not paid the tax dating back to 2014-15 until this last year, 24-25. So for both the Timberwolves and the Knicks, this is new territory for them to be in the tax. Like this year, Ant, his money kicked in, right? And JD McDaniels' money kicked in. So now they're in the tax. Plus they got out of Cat, which is in part why the Knicks have gotten to this point. So we're talking about teams that have habitually like stayed out of the tax, that are now taxpayers because they feel like they have a reason to win. So there's a correlation and causation effect. Like in theory, you shouldn't pay tax unless you are at a point where you believe you can win. And so were they not able to win because they weren't paying tax? Or were they not paying tax because they weren't ready to win and they chose not to? So it's all relative to each thing. But like, if we look at like the last time the Hawks paid the tax was 2011-12. So, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I have that that's the last time they paid. The Celtics have consistently paid the tax. The Nets chose to pay the tax when they had the KD thing. And they've been willing to pay the tax historically, but the Hornets never. Chicago did pay the tax last in 15-16, in a long time. So even the argument against Reinsdorf, he did pay the tax twice. Since 2011, he paid 2012-13, 2015-16. Cleveland showed it was willing to pay the tax in the LeBron era, showing again they're willing to pay the tax now that they have a chance to win. Dallas has almost always avoided it, but they did pay it in 22-23.
But this is different owners though too.
Yeah, and then Denver never paid the tax until they got to this level. So Detroit never paid the tax in this period of time, dating back to 2011. Golden State obviously has been a heavy payer, but Houston paid it once in 2015-16, and they did have an ownership change, if anything, to an owner that seems less willing to spend. The Clippers have been willing. The Lakers have been willing. There's cries that the Lakers are cheap. They're so cheap. Like what? They're one of the highest spending teams. I don't know whether, I mean, they're cheap in some ways, arguably, but you know, those are more subtle ways. They're not cheap in talent, paying for talent. Miami paid a little bit of tax, not a lot.
They don't seem to be a tax team unless, like you said, like there's a team that seems
right, like if
only incentivized. Yeah.
Milwaukee in the Giannis era has been a tax team. New York, as I said, New Orleans, not at all. OKC was a tax team when they were at a higher level before. They're heading towards the tax now. Once you're paying Chet and Jalen, you'll be in the tax. Orlando never pays the tax.
Could they be one?
No,
Or do you...
no, never. No, they never paid the tax.
Well, they're the team that seems to be, or at least
I'd have to.
Yeah,
probably are now at this point.
Especially also, they seem to be a team that's going to be not hunting for a star, but I remember you the one who brought up Simons to me that I hear
Simons might extend. At least that's where that's going. It looks like Portland and him are getting closer to that kind of approach.
Oh, okay.
That's the buzz I've heard. I have Tyus Jones going to Orlando. That's my.
Oh yeah, the Tyus Jones, Gary Trent, Daniel Gafford.
I think Tyus Jones has more legs to it. I theorized that like connect Tyus Jones, Gary Trent Jr. would be 3 shooting additions, minus Jet Howard, minus Cole Anthony. and we'll see what that comes to be. Phoenix under Sarver was super cheap. Then they got to the point where now they're competing. They've been paying the tax.
What's your thoughts there with Gregory?
The tax. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. Portland paid the tax a couple of years. Sacramento never pays the tax. San Antonio paid the tax last in 2015, 16. No, yeah. So they haven't paid the tax in a really long time, but also they haven't been good in a long time. Toronto paid the tax just that 1 year, the 1 year that they won the title. So that was worthwhile for them. Utah paid the tax briefly, never paid the tax. Then they kind of escalated into it and then got back out. And then the Wizards, that last year of Beal Wall, when they were still just kind of competitive, they paid a $7 million tax. So any teams I left out aren't paying tax. I think that's all 30. But it just gives you an idea of like, we're hitting the Clippers, we're hitting the Lakers, we're hitting the Bucks because they've been paying the tax. We're hitting the Warriors, we're hitting the Wolves, we're hitting the Knicks, teams that are projected to be high spenders. We have to curb them, because if we don't, then the teams spend too much. If the teams spend too much, then the players don't get their full 100% of their money. The agents don't get their full commission. It's a little bit of a weird time where we have this new TV deal. So for a couple of years, it's a little bit less relevant. But by and large, you have to curb spending. Otherwise, the system isn't healthy. And you could say, well, let's not, like Lacob wanted to not get taxed for paying the guys they drafted, like Steph. And well, then are you going to promise to not also spend on other guys? No, of course not. They want to also spend on they want to pay the tax. They want to win. They want to spend as much as they can. So if teams are spending too much, the system doesn't work. If teams aren't spending enough, the system doesn't work. And we have new rules on that. The same rules that people are yelling at, the league and the CBA and all this, they're not yelling about the floor or the minimum team salary. That is why Bruce Brown got paid as much as he got, which is why Tobias Harris got as much as he got, which also helped the Pistons win. Mm-hmm. So, like, we have a different system. There are pros that are very healthy that the players and the NBPA negotiated into the deal that helps them. And if we're splitting the money 50-50, does it matter that we're saying some teams can't spend as much as they possibly want through trades and through flexibility when the players are still going to get the same amount of money? We're saying we need it to be done differently, and we need to curb the spending so that it doesn't get too high, because if it gets too high, the players don't get that anyway. So if teams are exceeding the rules, that doesn't help. We need it to be spread out. We need the money to be equal to 50% of what is BRI. And if it's not, then everybody on some level loses. Either the teams have to shell out extra money they didn't want to spend. Of course, they're making more, but they're shelling out more. Or the players are giving back more, and no one wants it. And it, like for LeBron over 20 years or so, it all averages out. But for somebody who's in the league 3 or 4 years and is just earning now, even on a two-way, you're only getting 90% of your money on a two-way. The two-way's only got 91%. This is not a lot of money relative to what someone who's in the league for 20 years will make. So it's not great that you're not making all your money when you're barely here. And that the bulk of the players, if you say like, it's like a pyramid, your top players like LeBron and Steph are around for 15, 20 years. And then, you have some guys like Taj Gibson who are around a long time.
Yeah.
Udonis Haslem, whatever. But like most guys, the biggest part of the pyramid of NBA players are only in the league 3 or 4 years, 5 years, whatever. And that might not even be a full year. That might even be a couple of 10 days or a two-way where you didn't earn. We're talking hundreds of thousands, not millions and millions. And while, we're all watching this and, I would love to be on an NBA team and make $500,000 to just never play. We're talking about the NBA economy. Within that economy, $500,000 is nothing. When the minimum is $1 million or $1.2 million this year or whatever it is, it's 500 isn't even that. So we need the system to be healthy. The selective outrage on how it's terrible and the new deal's terrible is usually just based on people not knowing the system. Again, I won't sit here and say it's perfect because it's, I have areas of weakness. I'm watching and monitor things I don't love, but the apron system is like, you can't have teams just spend at these highest levels constantly, because if they don't care and there's no ceiling, then it's one or two teams is going to cost everybody else 10% of their money, or in the range of 10% of their money. That's crazy. Right?
No, and
I don't want the Warriors and the Clippers to cost my player, if I'm an agent, and my wallet 10%. That doesn't make any sense.
yeah, of course. And to speak of salary curbing, this is kind of like the last thing I really wanted to talk about. There are three teams that I think we didn't touch on that everyone would say need to curb salary, and that is Boston, Phoenix, and Denver, depending on what they're doing. And if you're there, it seems like regardless of what those teams do, there's only two teams that may, and you told me this, most deals moving forward are going to have to be 3-team trades or more, because it seems like to get a deal done, it's going to be easier if you have more partners to help facilitate said deals.
I don't know if it's most. I think the majority will still be 2, but I think there's already a statistical increase in multi-team trades. Like, I talked to Mitch Kupchak. What year was it? It was probably around the Dwight trade. So we're talking, whatever, like 13 or so, 2012.
12.
Somewhere around there. So we're talking about 13 years ago. I talked to Mitch Kupchak, and it was the Lakers. And I'm like, you might have been able to, or maybe it was the Trevor Ariza leaving and them getting Ron Artest. So it might have even been a couple years earlier. It was somewhere in that range. Meta World Peace, Ron Artest. So like, I was saying, you might have been able to generate that flexibility if you did it multi-team. He's like, yeah, but the moment you start going multi-team, you try to get cute. You have more people who say no, the deals get harder, and it's just more likely it's just going to blow up in your face. And while that's a conservative approach, it's conservative at the time. That was kind of the thinking for a lot of teams. You did multi-team when you had to, but it wasn't like, oh, let's just get another team involved. Now, because of the complexities, that's kind of like, you're going to move Jimmy Butler, you got to get other teams involved. You want to make a big deal with a lot of moving parts with apron teams, you have to have someone who can take on the salary. Not only that, teams like Charlotte, San Antonio in recent years, Detroit, potentially Brooklyn this year, are putting themselves in the position to be the recipients or the beneficiaries of those teams needing a third partner, so they can just they'll take on salary, but they get young players and draft compensation, draft picks to take on junk contracts.
Sure.
So it might be someone they take on and then cut or flip for someone else. That it's become more common because it's necessary. You look at Phoenix, like Phoenix is what it is. Like, they saw the new rules and decided to defy them. And will that work? So far, the answer is no. Doesn't mean it won't work this year. They could win the title 25-26 and shock the world. I don't think they will. We don't know what's going to happen. Any of the 30 teams could win.
But to offset those players, it would have to be a multi-team trade more than likely if they wanted to trade a Beal or a Durant.
Salary via trades. So
yeah,
it just gets harder and harder. So there might be situations where if they want to reduce salary, then if they make a trade taking in someone making 10 and maybe they're sending out 30, well, who's taking on the additional 20? So there's all kinds of different ways to go about it. I don't know that they're going to try to reduce salary. They may just stay as high as possible. Boston, I spoke to some people with the Celtics before the year who said that, like, if they win again, it's going to be up to the new owners, but it's going to be very hard not to go for a three-peat with the existing group. They didn't win. Tatum,
you have an extension
out for the whole year. So even before that, they were saying if they don't win, they're going to have to make difficult decisions because tax rates double, the repeater tax doubles. The tax rates shift where the lower rates actually drop. For a team like New Orleans, which is never in the tax, it's less expensive to be in the tax for the first two brackets.
Mm-hmm.
Then by the third bracket, it makes up for the lower, and then it offsets, and very quickly it ramps up even higher. So the tax bill for teams like Boston, Phoenix, Cleveland, Denver, they all start to jump. Denver has been under the second apron. They've stayed under the second apron and will stay under the second apron. So it's really just a matter of how much they want to pay for a team that is with Jokic and Jamal Murray if healthy, arguably a contender, but too thin to really be a dominant one. And so they have to make a decision. Can they get value for Michael Porter Jr. to replenish depth? Is there a different path? First of all, is Jokic willing to extend? That's a big question that no one's really talking about. Like, if the answer is yes, they'll extend him and he'll take money and he'll be under contract with the team for a long time. If he doesn't want to extend, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that he's leaving? And if he's leaving, can they afford to let the best player in the league, debatable between Shea or whatever you want to argue, but like, let's say he's the best player in the league, theoretically. Do you just let him walk for nothing? So at some point, does Denver have to trade Jokic? I'm not saying if an aggregator says, oh, I heard Eric say that, it's crazy. No, I'm saying if he doesn't take the extension, which he probably will, then what? If he's not taking it, what does that mean? Why isn't he taking it? And then if he's not taking it, does that mean that he's not going to resign? He'll be unrestricted when the time comes. A lot of teams would put themselves in position to have cap room to get Nikola Jokic, even if they don't get it, to at least make a run at him, right? And he's around 30, but he's not at a point where you're like, oh, he's starting to fade. There's no sign that he's fading yet. You can probably get 5 years out of Jokic if you think he's right now. Look, obviously Tatum got hurt, guys get hurt, but there's no I knew that Paul George, watching him in LA with the Clippers, I knew that his value was decreasing in terms of production. You would get 25% of his games would be like, and that's a made up number, but 25%, you're like, this guy might be the best guy in the league. And 25%, you'd be like, this might be the worst guy in the league. Then the other 50% would be some mixed bag of in the middle where it's like he'd show signs and then you'd be like, oh man, his legs are dead. And the Sixers invested like he was still that guy when he's not that guy. Jokic appears to still be that guy. So give him a max extension. He'll take it probably. But if he doesn't, what then? And, he may not want to, he may love Denver and want to be there his whole career, whether they're a top contender or not. Or maybe he's greedy for another opportunity to win a ring and wants to be somewhere else. I have no idea. We can only guess at this point. But Denver is in a limited position with that payroll that high.
You can go.
Go ahead. Well,
I was going to say, go ahead. You finish what you were going to say, Eric.
Let me see when they're a repeater. Denver has been in attacks 22, 23, and 24. So they are now a repeat offender.
So with that being said, you kind of touched on it. Denver, Boston technically has two ways, but Denver, like Phoenix, you kind of have, it's kind of obvious what the player or players they would move to get under or to upgrade the team, because with Denver, like you said, it's Michael Porter Jr. because Darius Saric and Zeke Naji don't have any or even negative value towards them. So you would think that if they were trying, obviously you would love to move Zeke or Dario, but I don't think that's happening unless you're giving up Payne Watson.
I think Saric. That's how they say it on the broadcast.
Saric. Like I'm Sean Connery.
When I was listening to the Phoenix broadcast,
Saric.
I would he would say when he was with Phoenix, they would say Saric, and I'm like, that's how you say that?
I did not know that. Yeah, I thought it was like the other Yugoslavians.
Well, maybe the guy in Phoenix was saying it wrong.
No, I like the Sean Connery sound to it, Saric.
I don't know. That's how I say it because that's what the guy in Phoenix used to say. There is a pronunciation guide. I probably should look
there. If you go to NBA.com, I think if you click on it,
I know where it is. I just don't.
Yeah, same
bandwidth to really read it.
I read somewhere.
Caster in terms of doing the the live games, I would get all those right within the best of my ability, but I just don't say their names enough in public to have to worry about it. But Saric might sign overseas and then take a buyout. He'll opt in and then maybe take a buyout. So they could get out of some of his money that way, but they could eventually they could trade a young guy.
I've read Watson is one because he plays a similar role to Aaron Gordon. You're going to choose probably Brown over Watson.
It's a team that needs young, cheap talent.
Yeah,
then also exactly. Watson needs to be paid soon. So if Watson's expecting to be paid, what is he expecting to be paid, and can he get paid what he wants? And the answer might be a no in Denver based on their situation. And then Najee, it's a tough one, but they could always stretch the salary out, and that would take the money off. That's what Phoenix did with the dude that they got from the Blazers. I'll pull it up. He's in the G League, or he was in the G League this last season. Nasir Little.
Oh yeah, Nas Little, they did do that. Yeah.
So there are always ways to be creative and to make things happen if you're so motivated.
If you're motivated, when trying to dangle Watson as a sweetener to get off of a contract like Najee.
Only if you're not intending to pay Watson. If you think
of
Watson
course.
is, because they just don't have enough talent. They're at a talent deficit. So trading away, whether you like Watson or not, he was a playoff rotation player for them.
Yes.
They don't have enough playoff rotation guys. He's extension eligible this summer. If they're not going to pay him his value that he thinks it is this next summer, or they can extend him this summer or pay him next summer as a restricted free agent. If they think they'll win that battle, they also have to pay Christian Brown. And Christian Brown is probably looking at like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like he is
They need to keep him.
An impact starter in the playoffs, which is crazy. And God, congrats. I'm happy for him. So to be able to prove himself as a player, he helped them win that first year, but like it was sort of in spot moments. Now he's like part of the reason why they're successful. So
He could be Michael Porter Jr.'s replacement in terms of.
But maybe closer to 30 million is what he's just looking at this point, which whether he gets or not, maybe 25 if they can get him down to that number. Like you could say, well, we're paying Gordon. Gordon's getting 32 next year, so even the Gordon argument, he's making 23 this year, so even that doesn't hold up as much. So Najee is a stretchable player. If you get Saric on a buyout and maybe get $1 million off or something, and maybe stretch that number too, you start to hurt your future flexibility, but future flexibility might not matter. So if you're paying Jokic, Jamal, and you trade Porter and keep Gordon, pay Brown, and then decide on Watson, and obviously there's Deron Holmes getting healthy might help.
Another trade chip though too.
Well, I mean, again, like they need the cheap talents. Holmes is $3.4 million next year, not even this year. So this year I'm saying 25-26. He's 3.2. Then he's 3.4. Then he's 5.5. So I wouldn't trade him.
But there's no draft assets is what I'm saying. If like you were trying to move off a Porter Jr. contract, you're going to probably have to give up a young guy like Watson who you don't want to pay, or Deron Holmes. You get what I'm saying?
Doing Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett, maybe Strawther because his contract is coming up. Probably Watson. Get him to a team that is willing to pay him. If you're not, like you're trading Watson before Holmes, because Holmes' value is at a minimum because he didn't even play last year, and he hasn't proven that he's an NBA player yet, just because he's a rookie, right? Like a rookie has to prove on the court that they can impact. Doesn't matter where you were drafted.
And he's coming off an Achilles.
Right. So what is he? You don't want to trade him, number one, because he's cheap. Number two, he's long. And number three, his value is a bottom. Whereas Watson, maybe you can trade him off of the spikes that he had in the playoffs and get him to a team that likes the contractual position he's in. Where if you can get Peyton Watson at like $20 million a year, if you think that's what he's worth, and he wants 30, but you can get him to 20, or if he's wants 25 and you can get him to 15, like 17, like there's some number that maybe Denver's not willing to pay, that maybe some other team's willing to pay, then you might be able to move Najee in that. You might be able to move Saric in that, or maybe there's some sort of combination with Porter Jr. So I'm not a very big believer in the fan brain desolation theory of like, oh, everything is over, we're screwed, it's terrible, everything's terrible, we're never going to be good. Things change very quickly, and you can, like the Doncic trade is certainly an example of that, or even Lakers with Westbrook, where they went from being a mess with Westbrook to going to the conference finals, which I think they benefited from a favorable draw in the playoffs. They were healthy at the right time, and they probably weren't quite at a Western Conference Finals level with the existing roster that they had, but at least their fate changed from being like garbage, not making the playoffs. Lakers are going to be terrible forever and waste the rest of LeBron's career. I'm going off of the exaggeration from a fan going through the pain of not liking where their team is.
If your
fans are in that position, there could be a quick turnaround, but it has to be executed deftly, carefully. And I don't even know who their GM is. Like, I think it's Ben Tenzer is like.
I think he was named officially. No, I think he was named officially with David Altman the other day.
Okay, so okay.
Adelman, my apology, not Altman. Adelman.
Yeah, if Tenzer is officially that guy and that's his job, he has been there a long time. He's been their strategist for a long time. Doesn't matter because my role in what I do is as a strategist, but I'm not the one making the decision. If I'm helping an agent, I might be helping them with strategy. If I'm talking to someone with a team or I'm writing a story, these are theoreticals. I'm mapping out pathways, but someone has to make the final decision. And if those were Calvin Booth and I know a lot of strategists who have been embarrassed by the executive decisions made, and it goes on their resume. So if you don't like what the Nuggets have done and you say that Ben Tenzer is responsible for them, it's on his resume because he was there, but he wasn't the decision maker. So I don't know him. I think I've met him before, but I don't know him well enough to even say. But that said, if he makes wise, calculated decisions and has some fortune, there's a pathway forward. But the most important thing right now is Jokic and getting him to extend. This year, he can add 3 years. He can opt out and add 3 years. He may not want to do that. He may want to get to next year and then add 4. But all that said, like, usually guys want to put on as much money as they can, as much as possible, as quickly as possible, especially when you're already at 10 years of service. 10 years of service being the most you can make. The most you can make is 35% of the cap at that point. There are ways to get above that. Like Jokic is making 35.7 because the cap didn't go up as high as we thought. So it's based on raises and such. But generally speaking, there's a limit to what he can get anyway. So the goal would usually be for someone like Jokic to add those 3 years. We're talking about a massive amount of money. He would probably get a player option. So he'd be going from 2 years to 4 guaranteed plus the 5th, which is his choice. So that 3 years. And if you're saying those 3 years start like in the, what's the max in, let me get the max. Get max for, let's see, 3 years from now at the top level, that would be about 72 million. Right. And that 1 year, 2 years. So it's 2 years from now. So I'm 1 year ahead. So it's 2 years from now.
$216 million though.
65.
Oh.
So it'd be 65. And then he could do that times 1.08, which is a raise of 8%. And then add another year. I can't really see what I'm doing with my mic in front of me. Times 2 minus that. So
from what
and this is pencil scratch number. Oops, hold on a second. Let me just
You're good.
What that figure is.
While you do that, though, I want to say Denver's situation isn't as desolate as fans want to seem. They have clearly players or ways to maneuver through the situation or just to roll it forward. But in comparison, if you're Boston, you're kind of you're looking at a more.
It's not a good time.
Yeah, because in my mind, the best case, if you're looking at Kristaps, you're kind of trying to look at Utah and get like a John Collins, I assume, or just flip Drew Holiday.
Brooklyn. It's like Brooklyn.
That's another that I was going to say, yeah.
Just take
okay, you're looking even just to dump him. You're not looking maybe to get expiring talent to try to do to filler. You're just going.
I mean, so like
you get what I was saying though.
Well, the number I came up for Jokic is about 212, without really looking at it closely. So let's say it's 200.
Okay.
If you can lock in 200 million, you lock in 200 million this summer. You don't wait another year because you can add another 60, 70, 80 to it. You like get a player option so that you could do it. Yeah. So if we're looking at Boston though, like they have so much money. And if you say this year is like, number one, they can't tank. There's too much talent on this roster as is, that with this coach and with this roster, they will win 30 games, 35 games minimum, right? Like unless there's another injury. You follow me? Like if you're Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Porzingis, White, Pritchard, no Tatum, and then whatever role players you have, you're still going to win enough games that you're not going to get a top 5 selection in the draft. top 4
But don't you want to move
right?
Porzingis and Holiday to
Right.
create flexibility down the road and in the short term?
Right. So Porzingis is expiring. If you can get out of him without anyone really back, you do that and just get that money off. Maybe I don't know that the Nets will take on 31 million, and if they do, they're probably going to want something really. They're probably going to want a first, if not more, and because that's such a large number. Because they could do multiple deals with their cap room, and they might be able to get multiple firsts out of multiple trades. So if you're going to dominate their cap room, it's not all of it, but a big chunk of it with 31 million, they're probably going to want something really special out of that, and so that's one issue. Drew Holiday can maybe / probably get traded to a team that views him as an impact player to help them be at a high level. But 32, 35, well, he's 33, well, 32 for 35 almost the next year, and then a player option for 37. It's a lot of money. It's a commitment, 3-year commitment. That's not every team's going to want that. Not every team can even do that. So those are difficult questions. Looking at
I know Washington for the Wizards, I think Drew Holiday could be like a dumping, not a dumping, but like a guy that they would want as a guard there.
That's too much money, too long. Why would they want Drew Holiday? Like, he doesn't help them win. They don't want to win, not yet. But he doesn't fit their age range, and they already have veterans who can help them in Smart and Middleton.
I was thinking of Marcus Smart, then you know what I mean, creating a 3-team trade where you try to Marcus the expiring contracts, which was what I was thinking.
Yeah, but they'd rather Smart just expire. Like they don't want to take. Well, no, like they'll take on if you're going to give them a ton of stuff.
Yeah, like sweeten obviously. I'm saying that teams like that.
Well, I just said how hard it would be to sweeten for Porzingis as 31 million for 1 year,
even expiring.
Yeah. Like the Pistons were asking teams for like 1 or 2 firsts this summer for their cap room.
Wow.
And then eventually they settled on whatever they settled, but they were greedy, as they should be. The Nets have a monopoly on cap room. Are they going to be less greedy? No, they should be more greedy because the Pistons, at least there were other teams that could do stuff. At some point the Pistons had a monopoly, but the monopoly was on a small amount of space relative to what the Nets have. So but now with Holiday, you're talking 33, let's call it 33 average, give or take. 3 years of that. So if it's hard to value what a dump for Porzingis would be, if it was a straight dump for Holiday for 33 times 3, what do you need, 3 firsts to take him on if you're Washington? Like you would need a massive haul because that's tying up your cap for a really long time in a player you have no need for whatsoever.
So it would have to be a contending team, you're saying, taking on Drew Holiday.
A team willing to take that kind of commitment, which is very few, that would take on that kind of commitment for an older player who is still very good, but how good is he going to stay at that price? And he's not like a lead scoring option.
You don't think a Utah would
Holiday
be?
Is like Utah, like why? No, like Utah should stay absolutely as far away from as possible from like. Well, I think Utah's still gonna try to not be a playoff team. I think that their conversations should be moving marketing. That they theoretically renegotiated and extended him to turn him into a player that they could trade for value. In theory, Collins is someone they should trade to get value. Sexton, either to keep him or don't. Clarkson, but like who? The way I like to cage it is like who needs to be on this team in 2 years on the Jazz? You could say Keontae George. We don't know yet, but we can argue it. We could say Cody Williams. We don't know that. We could say Taylor Hendrick. We don't know these things yet. Like there's no Collier. Same. Like they have good young prospects. None who we could say like you could say for sure that like if you're the Thunder, Shea needs to be on your team in 2 years.
Yeah.
You could say for sure that Jalen needs to be on your team and Chet needs to be on your team in 2 years. You might not say that at the same level about Isaiah Hartenstein, right? Like there's a point where you Alex Caruso at his age, you might say like, okay, like if you were offered someone else for Caruso in 2 years, you don't need to have Caruso. You might need to have someone else in 2 years if he starts to diminish and based on price. So like when you look at like the Jazz, like they certainly don't need to have Holiday in 2 years, but he would be under contract in 2 years, and there's no one else on this. So it's really hard to get a role player like he's arguably the elitist of elite role players in the league, Drew Holiday, but he's still not like he's not going to carry your scoring at 20 to 30 a game, right? Like he's not your primary driver of your offense. He's not going to be a Halliburton. So
you think Golden State, who allegedly are interested in Derek White, would want? Money. You get it done if it's Kuminga sign trade to the Nets on a $30 million deal with Moses Moody also going there, and then you send Holiday.
Well, your outgoing value for Kuminga is only half of what you send out because of the sign and trade rules. So if you send out 30 for Kuminga,
it's 15 coming back.
It's 15 out for the
players. Yeah, 15 out,
15 plus Moody,
11
is 27.
Yeah, 27
out, 27. You're still not at Holiday.
I think you can throw in Guy Santos and Trace Jackson Davis to get the money over.
Guy Santos, they like Chase Jackson.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying to get the money.
Also, I don't know that the Nets. The buzz I hear is they don't even like Kuminga.
Yeah, I know. I've heard that. I've heard that. Yeah.
And then like, what's the real value of having Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, Drew, and then maybe just Buddy and Pajemski, but no one else?
Yeah.
In a league where you have to have like really like 8 guys. How many players are the Thunder, the Pacers, the Wolves, and the Knicks playing in a rotation?
8 guys at most.
Right, but like
7.
They have guys though. You see what I'm saying? Like
yeah, they can go 10, 12 deep.
And so the Warriors at this point, a team that already wasn't deep enough to even field the team, in part because in the playoffs at a competitive level, and mostly because Steph got hurt. Getting thinner and thinner for an older and older player whose contract goes past Steph. That's an instant no for me.
Yeah.
Like,
so
are you stopping all their money except for Moody, which he's expendable? All their money stops when Steph stops. Technically, there's Buddy has non-guaranteed money, but he technically has an option. He has a unique contract. He has an interesting contract.
In what sense?
So, his third year is non-guaranteed. Actually, it's $3 million guaranteed, and then his fourth year is a player option.
Oh, guaranteed or non-guaranteed?
Well, so that's the thing. It has to match. We talked about that earlier. It has to.
He's matched
terms. So it is $3 million guaranteed, but it's scaled up base percentage wise. So like he went from 9.7 to 10.1. So the guarantee is proportionately larger. So it goes from 3 million to 3.1 whatever, 3.1 whatever. So it is partially guaranteed but he only gets it if he opts in. If he opts out, then it doesn't. There's no salary to be guaranteed because the year doesn't exist. If he opts in, but they can cut him before the option anyway, because he's only $3 million guaranteed the year before. The option may not even matter because he's not under contract to opt in. So it's a very unique, not wholly unique, but right now I think it's the only player option after a non-guarantee on the books, except for a similar-ish kind of thing with and the rules are slightly different in ETO. With Duncan, they're slightly different because that rule of having the guarantee to match, like the terms have to match in a player option, team option, they actually don't have to match in an ETO. So that's all these little different rules so that you have to keep track of.
So you would say Boston has the hardest path to get like under salary, to curb salary out of all these teams.
I mean, hard is all relative. It's just like, it's hard to exist in life, to function and survive.
Yeah.
Like Phoenix is facing like arguably the toughest position. Cleveland, if they're like, what do we do now? We're in the second apron. Denver, like if Jokic doesn't extend, that's arguably the hardest position. New York, if they don't win, like, I don't know. Maybe they're not in the hardest position. Maybe they are. Dallas, like, what do we do without Kyrie? The Lakers, like, what are we doing to try to improve? Minnesota, what do we do with Randall, who has a player option? I can go, every team has a hard decision to make. Which one's the hardest is relative. It's subjective. It's just based on, where they are. I mean, the only team that appears to be not facing hard decisions is Oklahoma City, because they seem like the best team and they seem the favorite to win it all. And their hardest decisions are just giving all their guys all the money that they need, that they could possibly, if they max everybody out. Is that a hard decision? If the answer is yes, they probably have to maintain that chemistry. And those guys are playing at a very high level at the highest stage in the league. They're going to get paid. Everyone has a hard decision, even OKC. I'm sure they're probably complaining about something this summer. Everybody complains about something. It's hard. All of our existences are hard in their own way, but I don't know which one's the hardest.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that every team, depending on the scenario, is going to have its own hard decision. But yeah, that's kind of what I had to ask you today, Eric. I do thank you for coming on. Again, all his information's down below in the link if you want. If you want to give us any spiel on where they can find you, if they want to read more, learn more. I know you just launched your Substack as well last month.
Yeah. I forget to promote that. Like, the main thing is check out Sports Business Classroom, because we are still admitting people. We have some spots left. We're not sold out yet, but we're a couple weeks away from being at a point where we're going to have to start saying there's only X amount of spots left. And it is an investment. It's not a inexpensive program, but it's also a very successful one at helping people get to the next spot, whether it's on the team side, agent side, just NBA industry side, media side. And I'm happy to answer questions. So I'm at Eric Pincus, EricPincus. That's on Twitter /X. You could just find me pretty easily. And I think, Sarah, you have some of my links or whatever in your program. So, but reach out, ask questions if you want to know about the program. And then I do have a Substack. I just launched the paid version. I'm still doing mostly free content. I actually have to catch that up after my trip to Chicago. I'm going to do a post on a little bit on my experience of just mapping out what the combine is like in terms of networking and such. But yeah, check it out. And happy to have conversations if you're interested in any of these things. I like to talk. I'm usually, as long as you're not coming at me saying, oh, you're an idiot, which, it's going to happen. But I'm always happy to have a conversation if you don't agree with my article. And as long as you're being respectful about it, just know I put a lot of thought into it, whether you agree or not with my conclusion. Doesn't mean nothing is done for clicks. I don't get paid any extra money by Bleacher Report for any level of traffic. It's like, that has no bearing. It's never been ever mentioned in any conversation I've had in all the years I've been there. Any sort of, I have no incentive. To me, it hurts my brand if I'm putting out nonsense, right? People, if I write stupid stuff, it's not gonna, when I go and talk to a team, they're gonna say, how could you write that nonsense about us? That's not what that's what I'm writing to. I'm not writing to gain clicks. So come to me with respect and you'll get it back, and let's have a conversation about, maybe I'll learn something that I didn't know. Maybe you know something I don't. Plenty of things I don't know. So anyway, I appreciate you having me on. Absolutely.
No, completely, Eric. And I'd love to have you on again in the future. But that's basically everything we had. And if you have any thoughts, just leave them in the comments. And like I said, all the links for Eric's work will be in the description. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Cool.
Cheers.